right, welcome back. We are looking at line graphs. So when we were looking at bar graphs are really good for looking at categorical data, but that changes, right? What we're going to look at now with line graphs are more convenient for data with a natural order to it. So if I'm looking at data, we're going to look at something called discrete versus continuous data. Okay, you can take a fraction of something, but not of everything. Okay, so if we're gonna talk about the difference between the discrete and the continuous in a second. But right now, I'm gonna ask you, like, if we're thinking of the height of a person, can we take a fraction of that? So if I was gonna measure the height of a person, I'm gonna do that. I could do that in centimeters. I can take a fraction, and an example of that would be Katie is 156.4 centimeters. So that would be the 4, right? Could be written as this. So that is taking a fraction, but we're writing it as a decimal. All right, date of birth. So we can say that's measured in days and months. And we cannot take a fraction of that because no one is going to say, hey, my birthday is June 27.5. Right? That's not going to happen. Okay, so favorite snack. Well, everybody's going to have a different favorite snack. It would be much better to chart it on a bar graph because it's going to be different. So the units are going to be different. We can't take a fraction of that, right? There's no possible way. The average temperature in a place. So that's going to be measured in degrees. We can take degrees Celsius, Fahrenheit, Kelvin, depending on whatever it is that we're measuring. And definitely can take a fraction of that because the average temperature is 24.8 degrees Celsius. The amount of flour in a recipe, absolutely. Okay, so I can measure something in cups, teaspoons, tablespoons, right? And I can definitely take a fraction because sometimes that calls for 1.5 cups of flour. Okay, so now when we're thinking of that continuous data and discrete, continuous data means that we can take a fraction of that. So if I'm looking here, the height of a person, I can chart the growth of my child and it's going to grow continuously. So I can measure it in decimals and fractions. Discrete data is something that is not going to be continuous. So looking at someone's favorite snacks, if we're going to chart that, okay, it would, on a line chart, if it's going to be in dots, it's definitely not going to be connected because there's not going to be any decimals in there. Okay, so another one that we can do here is Dinah's earnings. So this is an example of a continuous line chart. Okay, so I can definitely track her time, right? How many hours she's worked, and this is on the x-axis, and that can be measured in decimals. So if I have, 1.25 hours, I can figure out exactly how much she's making. In 1.5 hours, okay, 1.75 hours, or we can figure out exactly how much she's making, and so it wouldn't be broken across. And then we can also break that down. So she worked for 1.5 hours, she's going to make $10.50. Okay, so I can chart that all the way along, and then you know what? She stayed a little longer. She's asked to stay longer, so she's got 6 hours in, and I can continue that chart to show how much money she's going to make at 6 hours. Okay, so just stop right here, break out your worksheet, do questions 1 to 4, and then please come back. So just make sure you're using this data right now. Okay. Welcome back. We're looking at the average temperature in Vancouver right now. And so if I'm using this line chart, notice that I can track decimals and fractions. So on both of those lines in Celsius as well as months, because we could be halfway through February. Something that I want you to notice is if we're going to look at these spring months, what's happening there. Okay, it's going up. And then if we're looking at these fall months in here, they're going down, right? And so this is the natural order of our seasons here in Canada. And so the temperature each spring is going to go up and it's changing in those values and getting warmer and warmer. And then what happens, of course, and it gets cooler and cooler and cooler until we hit winter, and then it's freezing, especially in Alberta. Okay, so how do we see these changes on the graph? When the values of the temperature increase, the line goes up, right? And when they decrease, the line is going down. So that is not always the case when we're looking at average temperatures. Look at the comparison between Vancouver and this place down here that I'm not going to show you yet. In February, January and February here in our coldest months, right here, okay, you notice that's the warmest months here. And then what happens is their spring, whoop, what's happening? It's decreasing. And then in our summer months, it's at its coldest point, right? Exact opposite is here. And then in the fall, it starts getting warmer and warmer and warmer again until all of a sudden it's in our winter. So if I'm looking at this, I'm thinking about where in the world do you think something like this would happen? Okay, it would definitely not be in the northern hemisphere. This is definitely in the southern hemisphere, right? And if I look, this is in Canberra, Australia, which is definitely not going to be in the northern hemisphere. It's in the southern hemisphere, and they have opposite seasons to us, so this makes sense. If I'm looking here and I'm comparing, the weather here doesn't change at all. And so all the way through, it's going to stay consistently the same average temperature. So if we think about where in the world this might take place, well, it's definitely going to be somewhere that's close to the equator, and this place is definitely close to the equator. In Ecuador, right here, it is on the equator in South America. And so that's why it has that very consistent temperature all the way across. Whereas Australia, the equator is here. It's south of the equator. It's right in here. And the more south you get in Australia, the cooler it's going to get. All right. So what I need you guys to do is go and do your work, finish off your worksheet. And if you're having any problems, please make sure that you come to the help session.